The crisp dollar bill, a relic, felt alien in Rhys Kellen's clean, unblemished fingers. He held it aloft in the central exchange, a man lecturing on astrophysics in a mudslide. His salvaged suit jacket, a size too large, hung loose on his lean frame. Around him, the market roared. A crude blackboard, propped against a rusted truck tire, displayed his neat chalkings, 1 canned meat, the 3 battery packs. No one glanced at it. The air, thick with unwashed bodies and the tang of scavenged rust, vibrated with shouts. A woman haggled over a dented pot, her voice shrill. A man's fist connected with another's jaw over a handful of nails. The scuffle a brief, brutal punctuation mark in the endless hum of desperation. From his heavily fortified stall, Caleb Finch watched. His burly frame filled the gap between stacked, scavenged tires and tarps. Small, calculating eyes darted, missing nothing. He clutched a vital auto tool. "These beans," he rumbled, gesturing to a meager pile. "For that wrench, take it or leave it." Rhys stepped forward, the dollar bill still clutched in his hand. "That's not a fair exchange," he called out, his voice thin against the din. "According to the posted rates, that tool is worth at least." A roar of laughter cut him off. "Rates?" someone jeered. "We eat rates, do we, Professor?" The metallic clunk of the bank vault door closing behind him offered little solace. Rhys's study, a salvaged office within the derelict bank, smelled of dust and old paper. Piles of worthless banknotes lay ignored in a corner. He spread his meticulous ledgers across the salvage desk, the lantern light glinting off the precise columns of numbers. His clean hands, so out of place in the market, now traced lines of theoretical value. Abandon the system? Embrace the brutal barter? The thought was a bitter taste. He rose, a new task pulling him from the numbers. The community's medical supplies, stored in the old teller cages, needed inventory. He approached the shelves, his breath catching. Empty. The small cache of antibiotics, the bandages, the pain meds, gone. His eyes scanned the bare wood. A faint, almost invisible scratch marred the edge of one empty crate, too neat for a clumsy grab. A deliberate mark. Not random. Internal. Rhys stared at his worthless ledger. His principles, the very foundation of his new world order, were under direct, insidious attack. The enemy was already among them. He had to find out who and why before more vanished. Rhys Kellen watched the chits change hands, small, rough-cut pieces of wood stamped with a single-leaf design. His own hands, once accustomed only to the slick feel of a keyboard, now bore the faint, definite ridges of calluses, a grime-etched map of his failing efforts. He adjusted the slightly too large suit jacket, now visibly rumpled and smudged with garden dirt, the fabric a stark contrast to the makeshift market around him. The central exchange, once a town square, pulsed with a desperate energy. Tarps stretched over poles, crates served as counters, and the cracked blackboard where he'd scrawled "Fair Trade Values" stood largely ignored. Maeve Rourke approached his stall, her face weathered but resilient. She picked up a chit, turning it over. "These tokens, Rhys. They're just wood. What makes them worth anything?" "Labor," Rhys explained, his voice tired. "Work in the community gardens, earn chits. Use chits for goods. It builds trust, Maeve. Shared effort." "Trust is a slow-growing crop," she responded, her skepticism evident. "But the gardens need organizing. We need to get the planting right, or these chits buy nothing. I'll help. But your theories need dirt under their nails." She offered practical advice, grounding his abstract notions. She knew the soil, the seeds, the rhythms of the earth. Bryn Davies the elder sat on an overturned crate nearby, observing. His gnarled hands rested on his knees, his kind face holding a quiet, knowing expression. He offered no words, only a steady presence that Rhys found strangely comforting. But then Caleb Finch's burly frame pushed through the crowd, his perpetual scowl deepening. His small, calculating eyes darted, assessing. "These chits," he boomed, loud enough for others to hear. "Worthless. Just kindling. Finch's storehouse deals in real goods, real value. Scavenged items. Food that fills a belly, not a promise." Rhys bristled. Caleb had been hoarding tools and seeds, demanding exorbitant prices for basic necessities, forcing people to trade valuable scavenged items for a handful of dried beans. Rhys had tried to track goods, to enforce fair prices, but his attempts were met with accusations of control. "We need a system, Caleb," Rhys tried, his voice calm despite the tremor of frustration. "Fairness benefits everyone. Fairness is for fools," Caleb sneered, then turned his attention to a scrawny woman clutching a handful of chits. "Those won't buy you water, old woman. I have clean water. What do you have that's real?" The woman's eyes darted to Rhys, then to Caleb. She clutched her chits tighter. Later, a dispute over water access erupted near the old fountain. Two men, faces etched with desperation, shouted, their voices raw with fear. Rhys stepped between them, attempting to mediate. "The reservoir has enough for everyone if we ration properly. Logic dictates." "Logic won't fill my bucket," one man yelled, shoving the other. "My family is thirsty now." Rhys's logical arguments fell flat against their raw fear and selfishness. He felt increasingly beaten down, his carefully constructed systems crumbling under the weight of human greed. The calluses on his hands felt like a constant reminder of his failing efforts. A scout burst into the central exchange, breathless, his face pale with fear. Raiders, large presence, moving closer, fast. Immediate panic erupted. The market dissolved into a desperate scramble. People shoved, snatching at whatever goods they could, the chits forgotten. Rhys watched, helpless, as the fragile order he'd built shattered. Maeve, pale and grim-faced, pulled Rhys aside. She'd just returned from the community gardens, her voice tight with suspicion. "Rhys," she whispered, showing him a wilting leaf. It had a strange, almost oily sheen. "This isn't natural. Someone did this." Rhys's fingers, stained with garden soil, traced the wilting edges of a blighted potato leaf. The plant had not died quickly. It had withered, slowly, like a promise breaking. Maeve squatted beside him, her brow furrowed, a small ledger open on her knee. Its pages, salvaged and rebound, held the community's meager trade records. "Caleb's trades," Maeve's voice was low, "they don't add up. He buys less than anyone, yet his storehouse, it's always full. It's always full. And his prices for anything preserved, they keep climbing." She pointed to a column. "Look here, his seed purchases, minimal. But his pesticide orders? Massive, even before the blight hit hard." Bryn, leaning on a rough-hewn staff, his eyes distant, hummed. "My grandfather spoke of similar blights, not natural, chemicals. They used to make things, powerful things. Sometimes, if a cache was disturbed, or if someone used too much of a helpful agent, it would poison the land. Slow, insidious." His gaze sharpened, meeting Rhys's. "They called them a growth enhancer sometimes, a new wonder for the fields." The pieces clicked into place. Rhys felt a cold dread, then a surge of righteous fury. Caleb's pesticide, Bryn's chemical tales, Maeve's ledger, the blight agent. "The storehouse," Rhys stated, the words a hard edge. "It's not just food, it's the source of this rot." They worked through the night, Maeve meticulously cross-referencing Caleb's sparse outgoing trade records with the community's desperate needs, Bryn recalling forgotten details of pre-collapse industrial sites and their toxic legacies, and Rhys mapping the spread of the blight against Caleb's supposed pesticide application points. By dawn, the evidence was undeniable. A pattern emerged, a deliberate, calculated poisoning. Caleb had not just hoarded, he had created the scarcity. The central exchange buzzed with its usual morning desperation. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and unwashed bodies. Rhys, Maeve, and Bryn pushed through the crowd, their faces grim. Rhys held a bundle of Maeve's ledger pages, annotated with his own frantic calculations, a crude map of the blight's spread, and a small, sealed vial Maeve had found near a ravaged garden plot, a sample of the so-called pesticide. He mounted the rickety platform near his neglected blackboard. "People of the community!" His voice, though not loud, carried the weight of conviction. The murmuring died down, heads turning. Caleb Finch, burly and scowling, stood near his guarded stall, his small eyes narrowing. "We face a threat," Rhys continued, holding up the ledger pages. not just from outside, from within. He laid out the evidence, piece by piece. Maeve stepped forward, pointing to the ledger, explaining the impossible math of Caleb's inventory. Bryn's quiet voice confirmed the old tales, the danger of concentrated chemicals. Rhys held up the vial. This. Caleb sold this as a pesticide. He encouraged its use, especially in the community gardens. But it is not a pesticide. It is a blight agent, slow-acting, designed to create the very scarcity he profits from. A ripple of disbelief, then outrage, swept through the crowd. Faces twisted, eyes darted from Rhys to Caleb. "He starved us," someone shouted. "He poisoned our food," another cried. Caleb's perpetual scowl faltered. His face paled, his eyes darted, searching for an escape. He was cornered. The crowd surged, a wave of anger threatening to engulf him. Rhys felt a surge of triumph. The truth, it had worked. Then Caleb laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound that cut through the rising clamor. He stepped forward, his bulk pushing aside a few angry men. His voice, surprisingly calm, boomed across the square. "A blight agent? Nonsense. That was a growth enhancer, a new, potent formula I acquired to help our struggling crops." He gestured dismissively at Rhys. This boy, with his untested systems, his inexperienced volunteers, they overdosed it. Improper application, that's the problem, not my generosity. He turned to the crowd, his voice dropping, laced with a new urgency. While Rhys here was playing with ledgers and blaming others who was watching the horizon, the raiders, they're coming. And when they do, will his numbers protect you? Will his theories feed your children? He swept his arm towards Finch's storehouse, a dark, impenetrable fortress in the distance. "I have supplies, food, medicine, enough to protect us, to see us through. But only if we are united. Only if we are strong. Give me control. A mandatory tax on all valuables. A labor draft for the defense of the community. Immediate, decisive action." The outrage against Caleb faltered, replaced by a chilling fear. The raiders. The unspoken dread that gnawed at them daily. Rhys's evidence, once so clear, blurred against the stark reality of their vulnerability. They looked at Caleb, then at Rhys, then at the distant, boarded-up storehouse. "He's right," a woman whispered, her voice trembling. "We need protection." "Rhys's system, it's too slow," a man muttered, his eyes fixed on Caleb's imposing figure. The tide turned. Rhys watched, helpless, as the community's faces, once alight with righteous anger, now contorted with desperate fear. They had traded one threat for a far more insidious one. Their eyes, once demanding justice, now held a dawning regret, a flicker of understanding of the trap they had just walked into. But it was too late. Caleb, emboldened, a cruel smirk twisting his lips, had won. Rhys stood isolated, his evidence dismissed, his reputation shattered. A grim determination ignited within him. Caleb's power was built on fear, and fear, Rhys knew, could be broken. Rhys stared at the piles of banknotes on the salvaged desk. Greenbacks, crisp and uncreased, lay in neat stacks, monuments to a system that had ceased to exist. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through the grimy window of the former bank office, illuminating the fine grit that coated everything. His hands, once soft and unmarked, now showed the rough, dark lines of calluses, the dirt ingrained beneath his nails. He'd spent the last weeks hauling timber, digging trenches, trying to make sense of Caleb's promises. Caleb's protection had been a mirage. His taxes devoured half of every forage. His rations, barely enough to keep a child from hunger, left adults gaunt. The barricades he'd ordered built, flimsy and ill-placed, offered little comfort against the whispers of raiders on the wind. Caleb's scowl deepened with each passing day, his small eyes darting, his voice growing sharper, more demanding. He was a tyrant, not a savior. The community, Rhys saw it in their hollowed eyes and slumped shoulders, had traded one fear for another, their freedom for a false, suffocating security. A soft knock at the open door. Maeve stood there, her face etched with a weariness that mirrored his own. Her practical clothes, patched at the elbows, seemed to absorb the dim light. She didn't offer platitudes. She simply moved to the corner, settling onto an upturned crate, her dark eyes fixed on some distant point. The quiet, shared moment, the unspoken understanding of their exhaustion, was a balm. Maeve's resilience, the way she simply did what needed doing, a quiet strength that didn't seek grand pronouncements, struck him. Bryn's words echoed in his mind from weeks ago, about community bonds, about shared burdens. Rhys looked at Maeve, then at his own calloused hands. His focus had been on ledgers, on abstract systems, on rules that no longer applied. He tried to impose order from above, from a place of theoretical knowledge. But true value, true wealth, true security, lay not in the worthless paper on his desk, nor in Caleb's hoarded goods. It lay in the quiet determination in Maeve's eyes, in the willingness of people to work, to trust, to share. Social capital, not economic. He needed to build from the ground up, to inspire, not to dictate. The next morning, Rhys didn't confront Caleb. He found Maeve by the old well, Bryn already there, inspecting the cracked stone. "We need water," Rhys stated, his voice low but firm. "Clean water, not from Caleb's stores." Maeve's eyes met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Bryn nodded slowly, his gnarled hand stroking his chin. "A new pump," Rhys continued, gesturing towards the central exchange, the wide, open space that had once been the town square. A filtration system. For everyone. Built by everyone. Word spread like wildfire. Rhys, Maeve, and Bryn stood in the square, not demanding, but explaining, appealing. They spoke of shared humanity, of self-sufficiency. They offered tools, their own meager rations, a clear vision of relief from Caleb's grip. Skepticism hung heavy at first, a cloud of past disappointments. But the promise of clean water, a tangible thing, began to cut through. A few days later, the central exchange hummed with activity. Rhys, stripped to his patched undershirt, worked alongside Maeve, their hands digging, lifting, sweating. Bryn, moving slowly but with purpose, organized the distribution of salvaged pipes and filters. People came, first a trickle, then a steady stream. They brought scavenged materials, their own muscle, their quiet hope. A woman with a child on her hip carried a bucket of rocks. An old man, his back bent, sorted through rusted fittings. The sound of shovels hitting earth, hammers striking metal, replaced the tense silence that had settled over the town. Caleb watched from the fortified windows of his storehouse, his face a thundercloud. He yelled threats, demanded loyalty, but his words were lost in the rhythmic clang of construction. The community, seeing the water pump rise, a testament to their collective effort, began to turn away from him. They bypassed his store, refusing his exorbitant prices, finding their own paths, their own strength. Caleb's storehouse, once the center of power, became a monument to his greed, isolated, silent, its boarded windows reflecting a community that no longer needed him. The raider threat still loomed, but now, the town had something more than Caleb's flimsy barricades. They had each other. Rhys Kellen, his practical clothes worn and patched, his hair longer and disheveled, stood by the newly erected communal water pump in the central exchange. His calloused hands, visibly dirty, helped Maeve adjust a pipe. Water, clear and cold, gushed into a waiting bucket. He turned, a quiet, knowing nod passing between him and Bryn Davies as they exchanged a handful of dried berries for a length of sturdy rope. The worthless dollar bill was gone, replaced by the tangible results of communal effort and the quiet, hard-won trust in the eyes of his neighbors. He looked weary, but his gaze was resolute, a leader forged by practical hardship, his idealism tempered by a deep understanding of human nature.